PTF and Nick Tammaro back with you on the In the Money Media YouTube channel. Yes, you are on camera, my friend. We are here to talk about the recently concluded Belmont Stakes Racing Festival at Saratoga. Trying something a little different. We've never actually popped a show up the night of big Grade 1 races we're going to talk about. Now we're going to focus in this video mainly on the Belmont Stakes, but there was at least some results that we'll touch on quickly at the end. Going to have much more for you on the audio side. In the Money Players podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And then, of course, we're going to encourage you to subscribe to the In the Money Media YouTube channel, where we are just pushing up. We did not make the 14,000 goal, but we're over 13 now, and we're going to keep pushing. And by the summer meets, I think we're going to get there. Help us out, and also leave us a comment. Let us know in this video what we get right, what we get wrong, what you thought about these performances this weekend. Nick, I'll just give you the obvious softball to start off. How good is this sovereignty?
I'll tell you, Pete, he's gotten to be awfully good. It was a good 5 weeks for him, and he asserted himself clearly as the dominant 3-year-old in the country. Looks as if the plan that Bill Mott hatched early in the year really played out perfectly. This was a horse that they opted to skip the first Florida prep race to go to the Fountain of Youth, which he obviously won in very determined fashion. And at that point, you don't really know just how good they are. He hadn't really run what we would consider to be a particularly fast race yet. But, I think it's a little bit of a reminder of the old school horsemen and what they're capable of doing in terms of building a horse into a race. And Mott's really had him ready to peak 2 races in a row. Mott's one of those guys that you really don't want to fool around with when it comes to a one race engagement. He's very, very good. And we saw that really with Cody's Wish over the years. We saw it with Elite Power just in recent years, going back memory-wise. Obviously, Royal Delta comes to mind. And, of course, Cigar, who won 15 races in a row. So Mott knows how to get them good and keep them that way. So all credit to him. And, I mean, it was as dominant a Belmont performance as we've seen in quite some time, especially from a speed figure perspective. So all the credit in the world goes to him and the connections, who look like they were justly rewarded for making the decision to skip the Preakness and go to the Belmont.
It's a bit of an unfalsifiable narrative either way. What you just said, I tend to agree with. I'm here to come on and say, isn't that validation of Bill Mott's plan? But there are many others out there, including people I really respect. Duke Matisse comes to mind, who was very outspoken on our airwaves about him being very unhappy with the decision to skip the Preakness, and firmly believes that the horse would have won the Triple Crown had only he run. But it's, I don't know. I'm going to stick with my first gut, which is it's hard to question a man famous for picking out a target and hitting it when his plan works. I mean, I get it as a lover of the sport, as somebody who wants to see racing, on the national news front break through to the wider sports audience. It would have been wonderful if this had been the horse to do that, but not meant to be. And I'm kind of firmly in the it is what it is category, and just I don't feel good about coming on here and questioning Bill Mott.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an inherent flaw in the idea that we can't question the decisions that he makes. Bill Mott is not infallible. He doesn't make decisions ex cathedra, right? There's not, it's not as if we can't say, boy, I wish he had at least considered it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Should we as fans feel like we were robbed of an opportunity to see it? Yeah, we should. And I think it's totally fair to do so. It's also totally fair at the same time to say, hey, that was their plan. It just didn't really cross their mind to run there. And there's nothing really wrong with that. But I think as lovers of the sport, we want to see the sanctity of the Triple Crown really continue to exist. And we know the importance of the Triple Crown, what those races mean in the history of the sport. And we want to see them really continue to maintain the elevated status that they rightfully deserve. So Sovereignty is a horse that showed a lot more tactical speed yesterday than he had before, which makes you feel better about him, not only going forward, but probably better about how he would have run in the Preakness potentially. So, the problem with it, Pete, is that he is an individual type of horse that has some different things going for him that a lot of other horses wouldn't. So let's just take him and juxtapose him against Journalism for 30 seconds. Journalism is a horse that's owned by a number of people in partnership. Thus, a stallion deal means a lot to them, because not only are they going to get wealthy in having this horse go to stud, he has a beautiful pedigree. He's obviously going to be a top flight stallion. He's a multiple Grade 1 winner at this point. Well, Sovereignty's owned by Godolphin, who is going to stand him themselves. So they don't really, I mean, essentially, he's a gelding to them, right? As far as racing goes, they're not worried about winning grade ones. They're not worried about making him $150,000 stallion. They're going to stand him themselves, and he's going to get a lot of mares, but they're not selling him. They're not doing all of those things to try and make him a more commercial entity. And that is part of how the tail wags the dog in racing. And it is problematic when it comes to the actual on-track activities, because they take on a different meaning depending on who the horse is owned by, where they might stand, et cetera, et cetera.
I like how you frame that. It's one of these things that people generally in life aren't good at, especially in the days of the outrage machines and the various social media. People just want to shout their opinions the loudest, but it's generally a better idea to try to hold two thoughts in your mind, and they can be contradictory. And it can be that Bill Mott did a great job and got the best out of his horse, and it can still be that we as racing fans are disappointed that we didn't get to see a Triple Crown. So, I mean, I think that's a good way of looking at it. You mentioned the figure before. What did it come back?
109. So it was very stout. Yeah, going back through Belmonts for years, it's one of the higher figures. Geez, that I can remember. I think Essential Quality got a pretty high figure in the Belmont in 2021. That was a big gapped out field, but yeah, it was a 109, which gives Journalism a 105. Now almost to his lifetime top, puts Baeza at 100. Which seems to make perfect sense. And oddly enough, on the figure conversation, despite some really trying weather and some differing track conditions, the track speed didn't really change all that much throughout the day, according to a conventional buyer type of analysis of the.
Maybe
the
one notable exception, but we're not ready to get to that yet. That'll be at
we'll
the
talk
end.
about that in a minute. Yeah.
Let's not move on from sovereignty just yet. I'm just going to ask you a very difficult question. Let's say we live in an alternative universe. He runs in the Preakness. Does he win that?
The way it played out, and the way Junior has ridden him in the Derby, and now seeing the Belmonts having the benefit of hindsight, yes.
Yeah, almost certainly. I feel like just
Almost
like
certainly.
specifics of how it worked out with Journalism getting pinned down inside, and then the part two of that. What does he then do in the Belmont? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you have to ask yourself the question of, do you think Journalism was beaten yesterday because he was a horse running for the third time in 5 weeks and the fourth time in 9 weeks? And I don't really think so. I think the figures would bear out that Journalism ran his race.
Yeah.
I think I tweeted earlier today that the only thing I could think of with regards to Journalism that I don't really want to call an excuse, but maybe an analytical point, is that I think he's clearly a better horse when he has a target to run down. And, it makes perfect sense with the way these horses are trained. Michael McCarthy trains a lot like Todd Pletcher. They train their horses in tandem. Usually the better horses on the outside, they're having to wear down the inside horse. A lot of times they start with big gaps between them. So it really works in that sense. I think what we saw when Journalism broke free of that trouble in upper stretch in the Preakness, and he saw Gosger as a clear target, was a horse that basically said, like, you ain't running away from me. And he really legged it out and got him. Whereas yesterday he reached the front just outside the quarter pole, or in the vicinity of the quarter pole, and really was fodder for Sovereignty in mid stretch, just like he was in the Derby. He maybe put up a little more resistance in the Derby than he did yesterday. So I wonder if maybe he's just a little bit better. Maybe he's capable of producing. And again, the speed figures do not bear this out, but maybe he's a little bit better. He's got a little bit more courage when he has a target to view. Now, how do you do that vis-a-vis running against a horse like Sovereignty, who packs a bit more potent late kick? That's the question. You have to time it up very, very well. And, that's not to say that I think if Journalism had stayed in behind, where I think Umberto was definitely trying to avoid, if he had stayed in behind and waited and let Sovereignty get closer, does he suddenly somehow win a quarter-mile sprint home? Probably not. But the good thing is these horses are still lightly raced. We're going to see a lot more from them, hopefully this year, God willing, and next year as well. And we'll hopefully have that question answered for us.
Yeah, I think I do want to upgrade Journalism a little bit, not past Sovereignty, but I do want to upgrade him a little bit and I haven't really looked at pace figures yet. Not sure if there's any out even, but it looked like a fairly classic move into a hot pace and a wide move into a hot pace of that. And I'm not going to complain about that, because I was one of the people saying, you're on this terrific horse, Umberto, don't overemphasize the ground saving, get this horse a clear run. And he did that. And when he made the move early, I was happy with it. It was just like, okay, he's gonna get journalism a little bit off the bridle here, and he's got the jump. Now he's just got to finish, and then the other horse just, obviously had way more. And Sovereignty won by so much that I'm not going to say journalism was going to beat him under really any circumstance on that day to me. But at the same time, I think they're probably still a bit closer than the bare form suggests. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think so. I think Sovereignty's clearly better at this point. I mean, Junior was on a keg of dynamite the whole way around there yesterday, right? There was probably no circumstance under which he was losing that race. It was really just one of those good old fashioned steer jobs. Just get him out in the clear, let him put in his run. There's almost no way he can lose. So yeah, I think Sovereignty is clearly better at this point. I don't think that the distance between the two of them is more than just a fair amount. It's no chasm by any means. And I also think there are circumstances which, it's funny as they get into their 4-year-old season, if these horses, and I really hope they are both running, the majority of the times they're going to run against each other are going to be a mile and a 16th and a mile and an 1/8. So there's really only going to be one meaningful 1.25 race for them. Whereas as 3-year-olds, 4 of them are a 1.25 plus, or 1 3/16 plus. So I think that might be the scenario where, maybe journalism is able to bridge that gap a little bit. But at this point in time, I mean, it's pretty definitive.
We'll talk Baeza for a minute, too. I didn't think he was behaving himself in the early part of the race. He looked very keen. I thought under the circumstances, he ran well to be third. And I still think he's the one that could join this conversation with more maturity. And the hands that he's in, I still do think you can wish cast / project that a little bit. I'm not convinced that he can't still be a player. It might take all the way until the Breeders' Cup Classic, but I have a sneaking suspicion there's more to come from that horse. Are you getting sick of the act, or are you with me?
Yeah, I mean, I think they probably are supposed to go the conservative route now and run him in one other then, and let him kind of see the ball go through the hoop again, so to speak, and get him a little bit right in that respect. I fear that he's one of these John Sheriff's project horses that's just never going to come to fruition, because we've seen this before. He's got the quirky, weird. He was doing some stuff before the race that didn't look great. He was headstrong in the race itself. He doesn't really get out of the gate. So, he's very clearly an unfinished product. He's green still. So he's got a lot of growing up and maturing to do, but there's obviously potential there. I mean, and I think at this point in time, there's absolutely no shame in being third best behind those two. If you're third best behind two sort of average horses that have taken turns beating each other, getting 98 figs, then there's nothing, there's not really that much to say for it. But with him, I think there's no shame whatsoever in being third best behind those two. There are graded stakes races with Baeza's name on them in the future. I think that's pretty safe to say. I hope they're in 2025.
We'll keep our fingers crossed and see how that goes. But we got a lot of Baeza lovers in the comments, and I did want to say, hey, I wouldn't be again as discouraged as the bare result suggests based on that. Before we continue on, I do want to put in a plug for the new In the Money Horse Players Tour games every Friday, $20 to play. These are regular feeders to the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, but also, any week you finish in the top 4, you're going to enter a private contest at the end of the year. We call it the playoffs, where you have a chance at a $10,000 BCBC seat at no extra cost to players. Go to horseplayers.com and look for Horse Player Happy Hour. Let's touch on some of the other things that happened. Just rapid fire, Nick, because we know from the numbers that a lot of the people that tune in here on YouTube, they're not like the podcast hardcores who listen to 95% of the shows. People here, they're very, very Triple Crown focused. But we have to talk about a few things, and we'll start with the race that we saw today. The Manhattan, I tweeted it. I was not exaggerating. It got very dusty in here after that result. Wonderful to see Miguel Clement get his first of many grade 1 wins with deterministic, obviously losing his father, legendary racing figure, the trainer that I've been the biggest fan of since the mid-90s and just beloved throughout the industry. It was awesome to see. And Kendrick Carmouche, I don't know if you saw the interview with him after on horseback with Maggie, but just Oh, it was inspiring to hear his words praising the sport, remembering his father, remembering Christophe, giving props to Miguel. It was terrific, and we need to at least acknowledge it, don't we?
Oh, for sure. Look, I mean, I think there's a, there's a component of it too that any of us that have lost our fathers want to always think that we're carrying on their legacy, we're doing things in their memory, and I think that obviously probably hit home more so for those guys than anybody around. But you did feel like maybe Christoph was on horseback a little bit at the eighth pole, making sure that and think about all the things that happened. Right, they moved the race from the outer to the inner. They shortened the race from a mile and 3/16 to a mile and an eighth. They moved it by a day, and he won by a head. So it was like everything had to align in order for it to happen. And I'm pretty sure that even a guy like Shug McGahee would say, if we're going to take a head beat in a grade one, that's the horse. One of those Clement horses is who I am happy to have taken that loss to. So he's a horse that what I like about it, and I saw somebody mention this earlier, is that they didn't take the bait last year of going to the Derby when they had enough points by winning the Gotham, because it clearly wasn't what the horse needed to do. And they were rewarded because of their patience and the fact that they wanted to try him on turf. The fact that Christoph ran him on dirt as much as he did, I think said a lot about what he thought he could see from him. So yeah, he's a fun horse and obviously has gotten significantly better. Kendrick is an absolutely ideal fit because he wants to do his thing on the front end. And I would imagine they'll probably target a race like the Arlington Million. I think a mile might be a little sharp, so the 4-star Dave might be a little bit less than he wants. A mile and a quarter at Colonial is a race that he could probably moderate the pace a little bit.
Before we get out of here, I do want to talk about the race we alluded to in a vague way before, the race from a figure point of view or a time point of view that it didn't really seem to fit what we saw as well as some of the others, despite all the crazy weather. Referring to the Met Mile, give people a rundown on what happened there in your view.
Yeah, so the Met Mile came up very slow in terms of what you would expect. I think what we all knew was that surface was going to have probably 3 to 4 different versions of itself. So there was the sloppy track version that existed for the first 7 races on the card. There was the muddy track version that came around where the sun started to come out. And I had a friend joke with me that the track condition at that point was skippy. And it gets very, very slow at that point. And then it went to good for the Woody Stevens, and it was actually rated fast for the Belmont and race 14. I hate to break it to all the people who were telling me that they want to see journalism run against sovereignty on a fast track. I was like, it was fast yesterday. So the Met Mile just came up slow. And I think the portion of the race that came up the slowest by far was the final furlong. And it leads you to believe that there may have been portions of the stretch that were drying out very gradually and got very sticky. I got to tell you, Pete, I refuse to believe these horses ran a 94 buyer. It's just, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. I would have projected the fig and just given it a 102 or a 103 and said, I'm going to go with what works for this race, and we'll let them prove it one way or the other in their next starts.
Raging Torrent was the victor under Frankie Dettori, and Fierceness. What was your take going in on numbers? Fierceness was supposed to win. He was bet like he was supposed to win. Did he underperform, or did Raging Torrent step up?
Oh, Fierceness underperformed relative to Fierceness's best races. He underperformed, but I think we had forgotten, because it really had been since last year's Derby that we saw this kind of thing from Fierceness. But he's an enigmatic horse, right? He's a no-show horse, and what we saw a little bit of was, this is what happens when Fierceness kind of doesn't have it his way. And I think the problem with Fierceness at a mile is Fierceness really is a true router, which is just amazing given that pedigree. It's a very sprinty pedigree, but he's a true router. And what I mean by that is he doesn't want to run fast early and have to go fast late. He wants to be able to settle and get into a beat and wear you down with that ability to spurt clear. And I understand people might say, well, what about the Breeders' Cup Classic? Well, the difference with the Breeders' Cup Classic is that you have to go faster at a mile in that opening half mile. And yeah, they went quickly in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Different environment altogether. It was a wet track yesterday. You're talking about Del Mar. So I think he just got used a little bit too much. The other thing that I want to remind people of, and I'm not saying this because I picked the horse or bet him, Raging Torrent's good.
Yeah.
Like, Raging Torrent was absolutely the forgotten horse in that race, and it's because Just a Touch comes from Brad Cox's barn and had those big buyer figures. And White Abario obviously is very popular as a Breeders' Cup Classic winner. Fierceness, of course, comes with plenty of accolades as well. But Raging Torrent's good. Raging Torrent was good last year when he beat the Chosen Vron, and he was good last year when he won the Malibu, and he was good when he won the Godolphin Mile. So this horse is also an absolutely ideal fit for Frankie. Frankie, when he's on the dirt, is at his best on the lead. And he's a guy that knows how to ration speed along and keep him going, and it worked out perfectly.
Great stuff, Nick. Appreciate having you on. We're going to give short shrift to the rest of it, but I believe JK and I will cover a deeper dive on all the stakes races on the audio side tomorrow. We'll also have more videos. We encourage you to subscribe to the In the Money Media YouTube channel and also check us out on the audio side. If you like the sort of deeper conversation beyond just going over results and who is best in the Triple Crown type races, make sure you check us out on the audio side, because there's a lot of good stuff over there too. In the Money Players Podcast, wherever you get your pods. Thank you, Nick, and thanks to everybody out there for watching.